Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Dars highlights from December 12th, 2019. The Dars began with a vision of a faqira, a female disciple from Casablanca, who, in reciting the wird, the daily litany, described finding her heart. The Shaykh responded with a lengthy discussion of a common mistake that his murids make, that they look for the command of the spirit, or the affair of the spirit, amriyat al-ruh, before trying to find equilibrium and straight proportioning of their bodily frame. In other words, they seek the spirit without straightening their own horizons, which is their body, their outward relationships in society. And the Shaykh said it takes years for taswiya al-haykaliya, for the balanced proportioning of the bodily frame to take place. And the first mistake that you make is for looking for the ruh without looking on the horizons outwardly in your bodily frame. It's when the taswiya, the proportioning and straightening, occurs in the horizons that you find yourself, and then you return within. This is what happened between Musa and Al-Khidr alayhi salam. It took them a long time to wayfare. There was a lot of wayfaring that occurred, and the moment Al-Khidr gives him the sir, he says, سَأُنَبِّئُكَ بِتَأْوِيلِهِ, I will give you the naba, the tiding or the news of the inner interpretation of these events that took place. But the events that unfolded before that took quite a long time. Wayfaring, finding taswiya haykaliya, this sort of proportioning, balancing of the body, takes time, according to the time that you spent in ghafla, in a state of forgetfulness. But the transmission of the innermost secret just takes a moment. It occurs very quickly. The bodily configuration of Adam alayhi salam took a long time. Scholars are in disagreement as to the exact amount of time that it took for the clay of Adam to sit. But the point is that the clay was made by God's hands, and it went through several stages of configuration, but then the blowing of the Spirit was just in a moment. And the same is with regard to the fetus. It goes through many developmental stages over 4 months, and then in the 4th month the Spirit is blown into it. So instead of finding your heart, the first thing you have to do is find your skin, find your hair, find your bones, find your feet, find your ears, find your eyes. In other words, you find your body, which is wherever your physical body arrives at in the physical realm, that's your body. Your skin is the surface of the earth that you walk on. Your hair could be the garden that you tend in your backyard. Your bones are the mountains that you climb. And wherever your foot steps, that's just like your body. It's an outward projection of your physical body. As for the mountains that you have never been to, they are not part of your body. They're part of someone else's body. The prophets moved, the messengers moved, they migrated, they performed hijrah. From the moment of your birth, you've been looking for yourself, and you'll keep seeking until you enter your grave, no matter how long you live. And when you enter your grave, you'll know yourself, you'll know your heart, you'll know your reality, you'll know whether it's a garden of light upon light, as the Prophet ﷺ described it, or if it's a heap or a mount of regret, of darkness upon darkness. A place of darkness where even if you stretch your hand forth, you can't see it. This heart that you're looking for is that engine of the smaller cosmos that moves the greater cosmos, al-Kawnul Akbar. So if your outer body, your hand, your tongue, your ears, how you speak, how you engage, is contrary to the nature of the heart, then the first step is to prepare yourself and fix your heart and your body. Your body is like a ruined house. It's like a ruined building. It's not a house of God, so you can't find your heart. You say that you entered your heart and you found the sharayin, the vessels within it. Your body is this microcosm. In it you'll find, not only as you said the Shaykh, you'll find prophets, rivers, lowly forces, elevated forces, ulwi and sufli, and it all has to be cleaned out. You'll find even the Shaykh's enemies in there. If the body is not purified, the heart's not purified. So preserve and work on and fix your bodily configuration as we describe it here, because even a particle of pride in your heart will prevent you from entering the garden. You say, I entered the heart and found the Shaykh sitting in my heart and was surprised by what I saw. You'll find in it your Shaykh and his prophets and his Lord and his enemies. Your Shaykh is your Qibla. How do you find your Lord? You pass away in your Shaykh. Your body becomes your Shaykh. You eat, listen, sleep, worship, and heed the commands and prohibitions as the Shaykh does. It's impossible to enter the heart until you become the Shaykh's mirror reflection, because he is your connection to the Prophet ﷺ. Then you pass into the Prophet ﷺ through the Ahlul Bayt, and it begins by fixing your body and heart, so that your heart can become a dwelling place of the Ahlul Bayt, the Prophet's family, who then transport you in a love for the Prophet ﷺ, who then brings you to loving God. This bodily frame of yours, consisting of these parts, these extremities, the tongue, the eyes, the ear, and so on, that needs to be straightened and put on the path and cleaned out. By seeking to rectify your body, you etch and inscribe impactful memories upon the heart, by etching and inscribing upon the horizons of your body. If you just write knowledge on paper, the way knowledge production takes place nowadays, it doesn't leave a trace. Tadween, the authoring of books, should actually be an authoring of or inscription of memories that generate knowledge, and you do that through the tadween, or sort of the inscription of memories on your horizon. The stages of development that you go through in your life that leave an imprint upon you, you will never forget. They comfort you in your sleep, and they bother you in your sleep, depending on what you've inscribed. So you sculpt through your daily experiences on your horizons, and through wandering on the horizons, the siyaha, walking in God's kingdom, you sculpt these experiences, which are etched in your heart, which teach you love. This is why the siyaha fil ard, sihu fil ard, wander upon the surface of the earth, is a divine command. This is why the immigration, the migration of the Prophet ﷺ, the hijrah, is a command. The youthful shab, the youth must walk for the sake of God for a bit, because in their youth the fire of longing is in their heart. And so your takween jismani, this configuration of your body, and your body is like clay. How do you make it? You have to collect the right clay and pound it and sift it and add water and knead it and so on, and it's put in a kiln. It takes a long time, many stages. When it's ready, you finally put it in the kiln, and in a few minutes the vessel is ready. You become a shakila, a configuration. Look at the story of Musa alayhi salam, the prophet. He stayed in the Pharaoh's castle. Had he stayed there, he would have never seen the burning bush, but he migrated. He herded sheep for 10 years with the Prophet Shu'aib. That was his taqweem jasadi. That was his rectification of his body. What did that generate? What did that yield? What did Shu'aib say to him? Remind this madman, the Shaykh now is talking to his fuqara, says, "Oh, you who memorized the Quran, remind this madman of the verse that Shu'aib tells his daughter." Then one of the fuqara recite the verse where Shu'aib tells Musa, "I will marry you off to one of my daughters in return for you working for me for 8 years, and if you do 10 years, that would be even more pleasing." Why does Shu'aib, the prophet, speak to Musa alayhi salam, not yet a prophet, speak to him and say, "I will marry you one of my daughters"? Because he sees his potential in him. Similarly, the Shaykh may tell the murid, "Become my servant, be my ghulam, my youth, under my tarbiyah, under my spiritual training, and I'll take care of you." You see a similar relationship between the Prophet ﷺ and Sayyidina Ali, who grew up in his household. Shu'aib is a prophet. Khidmah, services done for free, not for a reward. But still Shu'aib offers him a righteous wife. Why a righteous wife? Think about it. because the obstacle of the youth in their spiritual training is usually a woman. And this woman will teach you the language of love, and you will love her sincerely, and she will yield divine love for you. You want to know your Lord, you have to move. It's not by sleeping in. You have to get up and work. Herd your sheep every day, the way Musa alayhi salam did in Jabal Tur, in Mount Sinai, which he knew so well, like the back of his hand. Shu'aib says, I offer you a woman to be your intimate companion on the path. She's sincere. She fears her Lord. She will be your professor and your mentor. You've been living in the Pharaoh's castle for too long, eating from golden dishes every day. This daughter will teach you. 8 years of work, and I'll give her to you. Don't ask which one. Don't ask, I want the tall one or the short one or the pretty one or not. Why marry her without even knowing her? Because she's a daughter of a prophet. She resembles her father. The Prophet ﷺ said, Fatima is my mother and a part of me. Why does Shu'aib say, I'll marry you one of my daughters? He knew that Musa was one among the akhyar, among the good, and not among the ashrar, not a person of evil. So why would Shu'aib marry one of his daughters to him? To teach Musa the language of love, non-transactional, passionate love for God. You become one, the two of you become one, then you will know unity in multiplicity and multiplicity in unity. You can't know the one if you're not treating your wife the way she should be treated. So you go out into Mount Tur and you graze your sheep for years. And Shu'aib knew it. Shu'aib knew Musa needed 8 to 10 years of taqweem, of preparation of his body and of his extremities. This one who outwardly stutters, can't pronounce a full sentence without stuttering through each word, was muqawwam, was trained and rectified by Shu'aib. Shu'aib is not the one who's God's intimate converser. He's not Kalimullah, but he's Musa's Shaykh. Musa renounced Fir'aun. He gave up those pleasures. He could have schemed to stay on in Egypt. He could have denied having killed the Copt. He could have found another way to stay where he was. But he had sincerity with himself. And when you have sincerity with yourself, you have sincerity with your Lord. You can't be sincere with your Lord if you're not sincere with yourself. This is what prompted him to undertake the migration, to seek God in the horizons, to configure or straighten his body. Then the Shaykh breaks out into very beautiful rhyming prose that I cannot convey. He described the beauty of wandering in God's horizons. And in this beautiful prose that he broke out into, he linked the waters of heaven with the waters that Musa drew from the wells for Shu'aib's daughters. And he made a connection between the intermediacy, the wasita of the daughter of Shu'aib, and connected that to the reviving forces of water from the heavens and from the well, and described it as that water as a trace of the perfect human being, of the Insanul Kamil, and as a door to entering into the Lord. And he said, this is how I entered into the heart of Shu'aib, who taught me, Musa speaking now, taught me to speak to rocks and to trees and to sheep. Now at this moment, he says, breaking into this rhyme prose, having done all of that, now discard your 2 shoes. Now ikhla'na alayk. What sandals were left for Musa to discard? He had fasted, he was wandering the earths, he was in service for God, and yet he's told to discard the 2 shoes. Discard your wife. Discard Shu'aib's daughter. Discard Shu'aib himself. And go back to the day of Alastu bi Rabbikum and say, yes, you are my Lord, to the tree, to the burning bush. If you're Musa himself, you, O Murid, you'll still need 10 years of taqweem, 10 years of putting your body back into shape. You have to wipe your blackboard. Your body's full of cholesterol and smoke, and you think we'll tell you to discard your 2 shoes? You have, then the Shaykh spoke in Moroccan Arabic, says you have a jotiya, a whole flea market of shoes. You have a whole supermarket of shoes. and you have a qareen, a comrade, a demonic comrade that's speaking to you. It's not your Lord that's speaking to you. So begin by straightening your body. قوم جسدك. Say astaghfirullah. And after 10 years of taqweem, after 10 years of straightening himself out, Musa inherited intimate converse with God, munajat. He overcame the association of partnership of magic, the shirk of magic, the shirk of tyranny of the Pharaoh, the obstinance of the tughyan of the Pharaoh. And still, after overcoming all that, Musa didn't stop in his journey, alayhi salam. He asked, is there someone who knows my Lord more than I do? Someone with istiqama, who has rectitude from within my fara, like Musa being the asal, being the root, and the other one being the branch, sort of like a branch of his community, him being the root. And the response is yes, that one is Khidr. So the first Shaykh, Shu'aib, puts Musa on istiqama. He puts him on bodily, he straightens out his body, and he finds there in intimate converse and munajat and a wife. The second breaks his habits. He does kharqul aada. He breaks the habitual course of his bodily rectitude. The second one divorces him and slays him. The first Shaykh shows Musa alayhi salam the hidden treasure from the tree. The second one says, speak to your Lord everywhere. The tree, or the treasure, belongs to the two youth. That's for the young ones. You've passed through that stage. Now you need the knowledge of the big ones, of the elderly ones, of adults, ilmul akabir, of the great ones. Before coming to the Zawiyah, rectify your body. Teach it prayer. So teach your body prayer. Teach it little sleep. Teach it to control the tongue. Learn to speak to inanimates, because you want to learn a language that cannot be conveyed with a physical tongue. Learn all those things. Learn to be observed by all things, because you're learning converse with the watchful one, with Ar-Raqib. Then come to the possessor of reality, Sahib al-Haqa'iq, who will slay you. But he can't slay you. He can't slay crooked people. All he can do is to tell crooked people to rectify themselves. Stop wasting your time. Ours has not been wasted. Even when you waste your time with me, I'm not wasting my time with you. And then in answering this part of the question, the Shaykh tied in all these dreams of this one faqir that he had to the story of Shu'aib and Musa, bringing out the point that God is with you wherever you are at all times. And there was this faqir who had this dream about, is either dream or awakened vision about fruit and being given a fruit. And he made this interesting point relating that experience that the faqir had to فَاكِهَةٍ مِمَّا يَتَخَيَّرُونَ. In heaven, people have, the inhabitants of heaven, they have fruits that they choose from. And the Shaykh said, you choose fruits that are suitable to your body. وَلَحْمِ طَيْرٍ مِمَّا يَشْتَهُونَ. And meat of birds that you desire. And he said, eating meat is an appetite, is a shahwa. And if you have a sickness, you'll find its cure in fruit. And fruits will benefit you if you know which ones. They'll benefit your cholesterol, your diabetes. Whereas meats are shahwas, they're appetites, and they yield negative forces. And this is even true for the youth who aren't married. Eating fruits, organic ones, not the ones full of phosphates, will help them in rectifying their bodies. There was also a question about the nature of the congregation. This came out in form of a question about a dream, but the question of jama'ah, praying in congregation, worshipping in congregation. The Shaykh said you practice and worship in congregation through prophetic permission and authorization, and it's a form of struggling against yourself internally, of fighting your own self. In a sense, worship in congregation is part of the greater struggle, the Jihadul Akbar, because you have to bear with the hardness or the coarseness, the jafa of the members of the congregation. But the Shaykh said, remember that you are a congregation even when you're alone. In a sense, you have 360 joints, 360 main veins in your body, and your parts and your mafasil and your veins, they're also brothers or brethren or members of your own congregation. Even though you think of yourself as this one, your hand is a member of this congregation. It will talk to you and back at you on the day of resurrection. It's a member of your jama'ah. And if your rows are not straight, if your body is not rectified and you're not in sync as a congregation, if you're not a harmonious whole, then your hand will testify against you. That's why praying in congregation helps to rectify the internal congregation of the body. Praying with groups out there helps you harmonize the internal members of your own congregation within you, on condition that you observe proper etiquette and adab and restraint and patience with the jama'ah, with the congregation out there. And then the Shaykh quoted Abu Madian, a verse from Abu Madian from his famous poem, مَا لَذَّةُ الْعَيْشِ إِلَّا صُحْبَةُ الْفُقَرَى. The joy of life is none other than the company of the poor disciples. فَاسْحَبْهُمْ وَتَأَدَّبْ فِي مَجَالِسِهِمْ. So observe their companionship and observe etiquette in their company. وَخَلِّ حَظَّكَ. Sort of discard your share, your personal interest. فِيمَا خَلَّوْكَ وَرَى. And if they, the fuqara, do not observe your rights, still observe theirs. In other words, if you don't like the jama'ah, said, you're not going to like there's something within you, in your body, that you're not liking. You have a split personality. We need another body for you, even physically, if you're irritated out there by the jama'ah. Hence, he said the sunnah of marriage, you need takween, you need a workshop to develop your character in order to live with a woman. And say if the woman is crooked, you need to have the uprightness to render her upright as well. If she is mu'waj, you need to have istiqamah. In order for you to be an ummah, to be a nation, a community, upon the method and the behavioral model, the sunnah of the chosen one, the Mustafa alayhi salatu salam. But you can't do that. You can't keep together a family and a marriage and children and be an imam and a leader of an ummah, which is your family, when your body is out of sync, when yourself, your individual configuration is out of sync with that family, with that wife, when your rows are not straightened as a family, that means you don't have uprightness. You're bent and crooked. And to be that, you have to find uprightness in your body. If you're crooked and bent, God will put you in a crooked and bent situation with crooked and bent family relationships. If you feed your body what is not permissible, and you use your extremities or your bodily limbs to enact prohibited things, the haram things that are prohibited by God, then how can your heart become pure? A rotten body cannot be the locus for a clean heart. Even the spirit, the ruh, is not there. All you have is a nafs, a lower soul that commands onto evil, nafs ammara, because the body is crooked, so the heart is ill. As for the people of rectitude, the people of God, you see them, you love them at once. You see their body and you love their heart at once. You judge them by their outer body. I have fuqara who come to me asking to take the Pledge of Allegiance, the bay'ah. They want to take hand and they have cigarettes in their pockets. He says, you're like a kush, it's like a dirty diaper. Your presence causes problems for the congregation out there and within you. We rehearse and practice in the congregation always, the congregation of your body and the congregation out there, the group of fuqara. And a congregation consists of two or more. There's an imam, a leader of the prayer, and a ma'mum, the one who follows the movements of the leader of the imam. Just praying behind an imam is a form of training for the soul. You look at the imam and say, I know more than this imam. You just become a mufti, issuing fatwas, legal opinions about how great you are, instead of lowering yourself and seeing divine beauty in the imam that you're judging, seeing deficiency in you and seeing perfection in them. You have to taste that lowering of self and exaltation or honoring of others in order to enter into this state. Hence the Prophet ﷺ's insistence on the jama'ah, on the importance of congregation. Then a female disciple had a dream which I'll relate in a second. But this brought up a discussion of the nature, again, of Iblis, of Shaitan, the devil. And he says, the devil enters through a certain door. He sits on your straight path. Iblis will disturb and harass Muslims, believers, in order to fix them and to rectify them in a sense. Iblis, Satan, thinks he's leading them astray, but he's actually among God's troops, Junudullah, separating or sifting the people of rectitude in body, heart, and spirit, from the people of crookedness. He's like a border patrol. He stops you at the borders. You're trying to enter into the realm of sanctity, and he stands at the borders. And he says, let me see your papers, let me see your permit, let me see your driver's license, let me make sure your car is up to speed and has all the safety regulations. We hate the border patrols, but it's for our own good. If your car is broken, he won't let you use it anymore. Iblis, in a sense, is aiding you in God's path. His whisperings to you are telling. They're a test. Who do you think will test you? Rahmatan lil alameen, the Prophet ﷺ, who's a mercy unto the world. Rahmatan lil alameen will give you a platter of dates after you sin. After you sleep with your wife in Ramadan, as the hadith says, he gives you a platter of dates. The uncouth Arab walks in and urinates in the mosque. The Prophet ﷺ lets him continue it and then forgives him and has it cleaned up. Iblis has no time for this kind of mercy. He knows the divine presence. He was with Adam in the garden, in the celestial heavens. Iblis knows Adam is the vicegerent, and he wants that vicegerency for himself, but he knows what it requires to be a vicegerent. So he stops you. He says, hold on, let's check you thoroughly. How long have I myself, Iblis, been in a state of worship? I've prostrated on every spot of this earth. Let's do some control of this body of yours. Your ear doesn't seem to be God's hearing. Your eye doesn't seem to be God's seeing. It's not all God light. I have the right to do this as Iblis. You're heading into the presence of wilaya. I was the peacock among the angels. They called me Tawusul Malaika. Yet I see your foot, and it's touched by nar, min marijin min nar. How do you want to enter into the presence without this body of yours being fixed? The spirit and the body are enmeshed. You can't separate them. The heart is part of the body. You see bodies in the malakut, in the spiritual realm, and they're luminous. Yours too must become luminous, and the shaitan is there at the border to check and make sure that you don't enter without the proper license. This faqira saw in a dream the Shaykh walking just ahead with no body, and then that head entered into the tomb of the Prophet ﷺ, and then the Prophet ﷺ emerged, but just his body and the Shaykh's head, the blessed body of the Prophet ﷺ with the head of the Shaykh. And the Shaykh commented, the body consists of the heart, the hands, the liver, the fingers. The head consists of the hearing, seeing, speaking, these faculties of the head. The sister, this faqira, is following the Shaykh with his hearing, his seeing, his tongue. Her hearing, her seeing, her speaking have become the Shaykh's. But she goes directly to the Prophet ﷺ's sunnah, cutting out the intermediary, not looking for the sunnah in the Shaykh. She doesn't apply the Shaykh's bodily limbs other than hearing, seeing, and speaking. She doesn't apply the Shaykh's teachings in other sunnahs. She goes directly back to the sunnah. And she says the Prophet ﷺ walked in this way, he slept in this way, and so on, not looking for the full Shaykh. You must pass through the full Shaykh and not take your body directly to the Prophet ﷺ. Until the fullness of the Shaykh is embodied in the murid, they can't bring it all to the Prophet ﷺ. Finally, there was a question from a brother called Ali from Egypt who saw horses in the fourth heaven and had an encounter with Sayyidah Zainab radiallahu anha. And the Shaykh commented, he said, some seek to know if they are from Ahlul Bayt, if they are from the family of the Prophet. This status of Ahlul Bayt is not one that you write down on paper and confirm through chains. And then he took the papers, as usual, when he finishes the questions, he wrinkles them and puts them to the side. So he said, look at me wrinkling these papers. That's not what it means to... I just wrinkled 4 senads right now. There were 4 questions on it, 4 chains of people's families. I just wrinkled it on a paper and I put it to the side. The Ahlul Bayt, these are pure spirits with no najasa, with no ritual impurities, the people of the first share in God's light. If you're looking for God's light, don't bother asking whether or not you're part of the family of the Prophet. Even if you have the chain, even if you have that sanad that confirms your lineage back to him, you'll still have self-doubt. But when the merciful flood of God's light reaches you, then the spiritual relationship and the earthly configuration of the Ahlul Bayt will reach you as well. The Quranic verse reads, إِنَّمَا يُرِيدُ اللَّهُ لِيُذْهِبَ عَنْكُمُ الرِّجْسَ أَهْلَ الْبَيْتِ وَيُطَهِّرَكُمْ تَطْهِيرًا. The verse about God wanting to purify the house of the Prophet ﷺ. These aren't clay, they're purified spirits. Then commenting on this was toward the end of the lesson. There's usually about 100 people listening to the dars, and he said, why is it that when we get to this part of the lesson, the number goes from 100 down to 70? Where did they go? We were about to start Salat al-Nabi, and he said, is the Salat Ibrahimiyya, the prayer invoking blessings upon the Prophet, heavy? Or your Wi-Fi just gets interrupted at this point? Why didn't it get cut off earlier? Ahlul Bayt, God bless them and brings them out of darkness into the light. Their tongue is softened by invoking blessings upon the Prophet ﷺ. Tonight is Friday night. Show me your sweetness, O grandchildren of the Prophet ﷺ. He longs for you. Do you long for them? You know who you are. It's clear who you are. The Prophet ﷺ stayed up a third of the night doing his awrad, his invocations, his litanies, his prayers, his fajr, his shuruq prayer. Then after that, he didn't sleep. He'd go out to tend to the affairs of the ummah, of his community. And yet you sleep in until 12 o'clock. You may say, well, the parallel is not really working because I don't have a nation behind me. Yes, you do. It's your ummah is your body. It's all your extremities that we've been talking about. Yet, Iblis has used that body of yours as his toilet. He urinates on you, so you sleep in it and you wake up with headaches because you're not purifying it. The Prophet ﷺ said, hikmah, wisdom will flow from your heart within 40 days of practicing qiyam, night vigils in his manner ﷺ. This is how you detoxify your horizons, your body, and begin to find your heart. Then at the end, after the Shaykh made these comments, a woman on the WhatsApp, on the Facebook private circle where he broadcasts his durus, a woman made a comment, said, oh Shaykh, take from my life and I'll give it to you. And he said, please don't pray that kind of prayer for me. If you want to pray for me, pray for God to conceal me, to have sutar, to cover me, not to take from your life and add to mine. That would just be a trial for me. I want to return to my Lord and know him in the grave. My furthest end is to know my Lord therein and thereafter. My greatest pleasure in the here below is none other than the fact that God sent me some people who can share in my madness. That's my greatest relief in this world, because when I was mad in love with God, I couldn't speak to anyone, and now at least there are those who will listen to me and who will share in some of my lovelorn madness for God. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala ali Sayyidina Muhammad kama sallaita ala Sayyidina Ibrahim wa ala ali Sayyidina Ibrahim wa barik ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala ali Sayyidina Muhammad kama barakta ala Sayyidina Ibrahim wa ala ali Sayyidina Ibrahim fil alameen innaka hamid